thanks for attending this mandatory training today. My name's Ryan. I'm a lieutenant with the Sheriff's Office, and we're going to talk for about the next hour, maybe a little less than that, about active shooters, and specifically active shooters in a school setting, and kind of give you a brief overview of what that is, what events look like, what an active shooter looks like, what your response should be, and what law enforcement's response specifically in Adams County is going to look like. I was up a little late putting together a PowerPoint just so I could keep my thoughts together as I rambled to you this morning. So wait till the end to point out all my mistakes and spelling errors. So me, who am I? Why should you listen to me? I've been in law enforcement 14 years. Some of you I know very well from my days as a detective, working in the schools, various issues. But more importantly for today's topic, I'm the department's Sheriff's Office lead firearms and tactical response instructor. So I teach all of the sheriff's deputies you see running around how to shoot their guns, how to tactically respond to situations. And I set up all the trainings and scenarios like we did just a couple weeks ago here at the school. We're doing some active shooter stuff. So that's who I am. I oversee the patrol division, so all the guys you see out driving around in their cars, court security, K-9, patrol sergeants, school resource officer, I'm their boss. So that's who I am. Just a little disclaimer, I'm not an expert by any means. I have years of experience in training. But I'm not going to advocate any one approach today. So some of you that have been around for a while have probably seen lots of different active shooter school presentations. There is, I can think of 10 off the top of my head. I don't believe in one versus the other anymore. I just believe in some of the common concepts. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. I also don't make your policy, so we're going to have some of the leaders of the district and school. We have open communication about best practices and what people should do or not do. But by no means does the Sheriff's Office set the policy for the school. So you need to be aware of your own plans, your own policies. I'm just going to give you some tips to stay alive, so to speak, today. So. An active shooter event. So 4 or more people killed in a public place with firearm, absent of basically criminal activity. Specifically, the causes that relate to school shootings are power and revenge. And we're going to talk about the profile of an active shooter in just a little bit, because I think especially as staff, you need to be aware of the misconceptions of what the student looks like that's going to show up and do an active shooter event. It's not who you think it's going to be. And that is, there's some very interesting statistics out there that we're going to talk about. Like I just said, there's some surprising characteristics that contradict the general offender traits. 1 in 6 high school students carried a weapon. I'm guessing there's some communities in the country that are helping skew these statistics a little bit, but in general that's kind of a scary thought that there's that many weapons being introduced into the school. On a side note, I'm sure most of you have heard about some of the security issues at the Sheriff's Office and the courthouse right now. We've been looking into court security options for a long time, and when we've looked at some of these other agencies around the area that have introduced screening to their courts, it's amazing within the first couple months of screening people coming into public buildings, how many guns and knives and contrabands they're finding on people that you don't know people are carrying every day. So I don't think those stats are too far off. And then obviously there's been an uptrend in the shooting, hence why I'm here today to talk about it. It's just becoming all too common as of late. Age, range. I think this is important. There's some misconceptions out there about this. Obviously, we're looking at those teenage years. Those adolescent years are primarily the years, the ages that these events are happening, but they're all over the board. This case about the 6-year-old, that's a premeditated attack. I mean, you think of the home environment there, the access to weapons, the thought process involved, that's normalized behavior. It's pretty scary. So just things to keep in mind. I'm not trying to scare anyone today. I'm hoping by the end of this presentation, maybe you'll have a little self-confidence about how you would react in a situation like this, so you guys can focus more on your jobs, which is teaching and leading our youth. Some misconceptions and some stats about active shooters. 40% of the perpetrators are failing. There's no typical racial or ethnical background. They range from popular kids to isolated kids. A misconception is that these school shooters are always the loners. Statistically, only 10% of school shooters were actually isolated. In studies of these kids afterwards, though, they found that their perception of how they felt as alone was a big factor. So many people that deal with students on a regular basis kind of know what this is talking about. It's their perception of reality, how they feel, not what maybe you guys see every day as hanging out with groups of other kids. Very few had a history of mental illness. This is surprising even to me, just because it seems like everything I deal with in law enforcement has some sort of tie to mental illness. But generally, these aren't students that have a long history of mental illness. Few had diagnosed mental illness. And of those ones that were diagnosed, few exhibited any sort of behavior that they were a danger to themselves or others. Those of us that deal with mental health issues on a regular basis know that's kind of the thing we judge everything by. Are you going to hurt somebody or yourself? It's very interesting that that's not necessarily a factor when we're looking or trying to profile a student that may be an active shooter. Some commonalities. 78% had a history of threatening or attempting suicide in the past. Obviously, the bullied and attacked or injured prior to the incident was a factor, and had a history of depression or feelings of depression. Again, when I was talking about what actually is going on versus what they feel is very interesting. So 71% of the perpetrators felt persecuted, bullied, or attacked, not that they were actually victimized. So Harrison Klebold, I believe those are the Columbine shooters. They had very strong feelings about how they were bullied and persecuted throughout their school career. And in reality, in the investigation showed that they were actually bulliers, and they were actually the people committing those acts, but they, for whatever reason, felt persecuted. This is huge. Counselors, people who deal with this stuff. 98% of kids or young adults that committed an active shooter event had just recently experienced a loss, a major loss, a financial issue, a home life issue, a loss of a friend, a loss of a family member. This statistic was just too important not to hammer on, especially with all of you dealing with kids on a regular basis. There are warning signs out there, and 98% of these kids, within a few weeks of an event, had some sort of major loss in their life. So keep doing what you guys are doing as far as providing care and mental health counseling to students that have those issues going on in their lives. And then most of them did not receive any mental health services prior to the attack. This is where you all come on. This is where law enforcement comes in. these kids have a plan, and they tell people about it. I could go into story after story. I'll save you all the sad stories about school shootings, but people knew about every one of them. 80% of the cases, a non-involved person knew the attacks, and 66% of the cases, multiple people knew. We'll talk a little bit about what you guys can do a little later in the presentation. This, I believe this quote is from, yeah, I have it in there. It's from Alaska, school shooting in Alaska. But just the normalized behavior and the lack of understanding how serious this issue is by the kids with some of these quotes that came out in the investigation where the kids are staging to film the school shooting because they know what's going to happen that day, but they haven't told anyone about it. It's pretty sickening. Rarely did the attacker just snap. There are often numerous warning signs, like I was just talking about. And again, many people saw the signs but didn't tell anyone about it. I think that's changed a little bit. We hear about this stuff often now. You guys are doing a good job of letting others know when you have concerns or safety issues, because we are taking these events so seriously now. 93% of school shooters planned their first attack, and only 7% were random. So if you add up everything we've kind of been talking about, they tell other people, they plan for a long time, there's all sorts of time for intervention from us and other important people in their life, like school staff or family members. So be vigilant. These kids or young adults study other shooters. Every major school shooting in the last 10 years, if the attacker has survived the incident, they have had detailed plans and have studied other school shootings about or how to make their school shooting the most horrific one yet. Many of them do these school shootings on anniversaries of other school shootings, and they idolize these other school shooters. They have detailed plans about the plans of the school. They have detailed plans about what you do on fire drills or what you do on lockdown. They know where students will be at certain times of the day. These are not random crazy kids with mental health problems that are just going to snap and you're not going to have any control over it. There is a bunch of information we can do to intervene with these, and there's the ones that are averted are because of that. I'm happy to say there are twice as many averted school shootings now because of people's vigilance than there used to be. Anyone from North Dakota in here? No? North Dakota has yet to have a school shooting. I don't know what they're doing, right? Or what's the joke if you leave North Dakota? Did you shut the light off when you left? So, as it relates to us, 300 shootings since '92, 600 averted, like I was just talking about. These are not isolated to large cities. Most school shootings have occurred in more upper class communities. Columbine, Parkland, one just happened. These are nice suburban areas with big expensive schools and lots of money, and they have kids shooting them up. 98% of these events have happened in jurisdictions with agencies with fewer than 100 officers. That's us. This is not an urban problem. This is not a Chicago gun problem. 98% of these happen in rural, small town areas where kids try to one-up the last school shooter. And it happens everywhere. I'll show you some maps in a little bit that'll probably shock some of you, but they've occurred in 42 states, with 15 states having multiple incidents. For all of you teachers in the room, I've cited the ever so accurate Wikipedia in my next slides, but I felt like presenting in front of teachers, I should cite something at least. So elementary school since 2000, we all have heard of Sandy Hook in Newton, Connecticut. That's, if you ever have time to just read up on Sandy Hook, that is just horrific. The 26 kids in elementary school, but that was a tiny little itty bitty town. They have all these great quotes. They're not great quotes, they're very sad quotes, but when you look into and study these incidents, some of the quotes from the local pastor or the local mayor or the local police chief are pretty astounding. They had no thought, they never imagined that something like this would happen. They had not prepared, they just didn't think this happened in little towns. 26 elementary students got shot with a .223 rifle. Middle schools, it's getting a little more populated around the U.S. I think the next one is high schools. This is in the last 18 years, school shootings. Midwest not doing so hot, guys. What? All right, so let's talk a little bit about your guys' response. What can you guys do? Who in here has had training or heard a presentation on run, hide, fight before? Most of you? Okay. So I'm going to beat that dead horse today. We want to run and escape if possible. We want to hide if we can't do that. And then obviously as a last resort, we want to fight. And I'll go over each of these in a little bit. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, let's just watch. I hope the sound plays on here. Do you have the sound on your laptop? Does it not run through the... You've probably seen this video before, but we'll just watch it again, this little overview. It's probably the best video out there I've seen that just gives a very brief overview of actions you guys should take in an incident like this. Who in here has seen the video before? All right. I knew I should have thrown you under the bus for the PowerPoint before this started. Let's just, we'll just talk about the different aspects of that. I'll spare you. The video would have been over by now if we would have watched it. Anyways. That's why I'm the lieutenant, I guess.
True.
All right, so your guys' response, first and foremost, should be to get away. We have learned over decades of these becoming popular events that the most casualties happen when a bunch of innocent people are locked in a room and they're just a big blob of an easy target to spray bullets into. Some of the crime scene photos from like the Virginia Tech shooting or Sandy Hook it's unimaginable. A classroom full of elementary students, the whole class just in a corner room, just mowed down. Get out if you can. I believe, where are you? Is it, you mentioned something about all the classrooms having window punches and blankets.
Something we're working on currently, yeah.
What's that?
Something we're still working on.
Okay, so that's a plan that's in the works. Some of you already have that. That's a great idea. So you have that option at least to get out of a window, to get out of the school if you can. This is where staff and especially if you have younger ones, you know, you're going to have to, and we're going to talk a little bit about mental preparation for this, what you've got to do to prepare yourself for something like this. But if you've got a class full of 8-year-olds and this is going on in your school and you've never thought about what to do if a gunman comes in the school, you should start thinking about it. We train that all the time with different tactical response things. I don't drive to work in the morning without thinking about a school shooting at the high school. I don't drive by a gas station without thinking about what I would do if an alarm came in right now that somebody's holding up that gas station. It's proven that we'll respond better if we've actually visualized and thought of these things. Now that doesn't mean you have to be scared to do your job every day. That should provide you a little confidence that you actually know and have had a little experience or training in what to do when an event like that happens. So, if there's a escape path, get out, evacuate others, especially the younger kids, help others escape if you can, prevent others from entering the area, and then call 911 when you're safe. I know it's going to be next to impossible, but I would suggest, especially in like the high school setting where you have a bunch of older students and teachers and a bunch of cell phone use, that if you're locked down someplace and need help, that you just designate a person to call, kind of like CPR. Like you call 911. 911 has 2 lines in Adams County. When those 2 lines are full, it switches over to Juneau County. When those lines are full, it switches over to Marquette County. Before we know it, we'll have every surrounding county in central Wisconsin running to their high schools for active shooter events when those screams for help start coming in. So not everyone needs to call 911, but we obviously need to know that information. So just like your CPR training, designate a person, call 911, let them know what's going on. Hide. This is your next step. If you can, there's a difference between just hiding and hoping and hiding and taking some action to make sure you can stay alive. So there's also a big difference between concealment and cover. Bullets, it's not like the movies. There's not too much in this auditorium that a round from a rifle is not going to go through. It would go through the walls, it would go through all the chairs here, but that's concealment. You need to be thinking about how to barricade yourself with real cover, behind brick walls, behind steel doors, those types of things. Sheetrock and plastic and things like that do not stop bullets. So, and then blockade and make things as difficult as possible for an intruder to get to you, because time is time is on your side. The longer you can delay that person from doing more problems or more damage, the quicker we can get there to help. Then in the last resort, fight. I encourage all of you to just once in a while, just think of this. Just run it through your head. What would I do in my classroom? What would I do in my office space? What would I do to defend myself in this area? How would I get out of here? How would I hide in this area? What would I use in my office right now to incapacitate someone? You've got to run it through your head a few times so that you don't freeze up when that actually happens. Situational awareness. This is a slide I use for tactical response training. I thought it was appropriate for this. Basically, like I was just talking about, you need to know what your surroundings are. You need to once in a while think about those things and be aware of what's going on. So crisis rehearsal. How many of you have seriously thought or have a plan for their classroom or their workspace about what to do if somebody walks into that space with a gun? Good. About a quarter of everyone. There's this old story, some of you may have heard it, or I don't know, in the law enforcement world it's kind of a common training theme. I've heard it since I was at the academy. But there's this story of this old prisoner of war that was in Vietnam for years, and to stay sane envisioned over and over this perfect round of golf. Have you heard this story? And the story is that when he was finally free and got out, he had the best golf game he's ever had in his life. He had envisioned it literally every day for years on end, every hole, everything he was going to do, how that would all work. I think that's a great example of mental preparation and crisis rehearsal. Don't think small things, think big things. I don't drive around and mentally prepare myself for the barking dog complaint. I can muddle through that. We'll figure that one out. If I'm mentally prepared for the hostage situation at the gas station at 13 and 21, I'm going to be pretty much mentally prepared for anything that happens. So just think about that once in a while, because ultimately, again, your job is to lead and teach and direct our youth, and you should feel confident and safe doing that. You shouldn't have to worry about what if or how I'm going to do these things if an event like that happens. Again, mental rehearsal, visualization. I won't beat this to death, but there's chemistry involved in it. It plays tricks on your mind. I see it with officers all the time. The officers that are prepared and train hard, prepared and train like the real world, react far better in the real world than others. Ooh, like that? So our response, this is just to give you kind of a timeline of how quick an event like this happens. 3 to 6 minutes, most of these. The shooter knows he's on the clock. He knows people are coming and they're going to stop him. They have to do as much damage as they can, or quickly as I can. And I thought there was, the Virginia Tech thing. So 7.9 murder attempts occur in each of the 17 minutes of attack. In 15 seconds, the average shooter will kill between 17 and 34 people in a congested area with a standard handgun. This is why your response is so important in conjunction with our response. We train to immediately address the threat, to not worry about anything else. We pound that into officers' heads. Many of you heard recently about the Parkland shooting and the controversy about the deputy waiting like 4 minutes and 17 seconds before he went in, and a bunch of, I don't Monday morning back cops too often. That video is atrocious. That officer stood outside a door while kids were dying inside, and now he's got a bunch of excuses about it. I just gave a training this last month here at the school with our whole staff and told everyone on my department, you won't work for the sheriff's office anymore if that kind of thing happens. And that officer, I believe, is being criminally charged down there for his failing to act. That still happens for some reason, and I don't get it, because we train and we train and we train to go in and stop the threat immediately. So there was a school resource officer on scene. That whole incident lasted 6 minutes, right in line with the stats I just gave you. And for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, the school resource officer stood outside the building. It's unacceptable. That's not how our department will respond. I had Zach running as fast as he possibly could down the hallway a few weeks ago. He's quicker than he looks. That's true. It's the hair, I think. But no, I have a little thank you later in the presentation to everyone for letting us do that, because it was a great experience. But next. So to kind of give you where that mentality comes from, this is a great quote from the founder of LAPD SWAT team. In '72, they came up with the first SWAT team, which is now just everywhere. Everyone's got a SWAT team. But interesting foresight by this officer back in 1972 with the formation of a tactical team, that it's a double-edged sword, and that we might be training future generations of officers to basically not do this. They should, when they signed up, like, oh, I'm a police officer, that's too dangerous for me, we should call SWAT. That's a mentality that we've been spending about the last decade to break, that if you're the first officer on scene of a school shooting, you're running into that building by yourself to stop the threat, because that's what you signed up to do. Again, some more timelines about how quick incidents happen. So again, our response is going to be immediate. We're not waiting for backup. We're not waiting for other officers. We're running by injured people. We're going to stop the threat, because as you see the stats, every seconds count. Every 15 seconds, every 10 seconds, another student could be dying, another staff member could be dying. So the days of waiting are over. Two reasons for this slide. One is we train at other facilities. This is at the county building. We're doing an active shooter training exercise in the courthouse. I believe this is up by the county boardroom. And second, it's a picture of Sheriff Wall with a little more hair than he has right now. This is early. I think this is early in his campaign for sheriff. More importantly, everyone is coming, so you guys should know that. There might be detectives in plain clothes. There might be game wardens you've never seen in your life before. Some of you see all the time. I don't know. I knew I'd get a warden joke in here. You'll see state troopers, you'll see Marquette County deputies, you'll see Wisconsin Dells police officers, Juneau County officers. When an event like this happens, it is a flood of resources from around the area that will all be running to save people's lives. The problem is in rural communities, even with the best intentions, it's a 15, 20-minute drive from all those places here. So. Height and Hope, it's actual surveillance footage from Columbine in the cafeteria there, kind of scary as they just mosey around the... Police didn't make entry for 4 hours, I believe, into this event. People were bleeding out and dying 3 hours later into it. Again, just an example of, in the last 20 years, how far we've come and what our response will be in comparison. This was an era of, there's people in the school, what could they possibly be doing? They must be taking hostages, call a SWAT team. When Columbine happened, we didn't know these kids just want to kill a bunch of people. That was just, it didn't make sense to anyone. They didn't understand their purpose. 40% of the perpetrators will commit suicide before Ellie arrives. Another 15% during engagement with us. They're twice as likely to commit suicide than to surrender. We train lights and sirens right up to the front door of the high school. We know statistically just our presence, just the sound of sirens, just the sound of them knowing this event is going to be over soon, usually ends with them taking their lives, which is just as favorable as us coming in, and the threat has stopped. So it's not a tactical approach. We're not sneaking around coming in. We are coming in loud, and we are coming in right away because just our presence might stop the threat. 75% of the cases, a solo officer response stopped the shooter. That's why it's so important. That's why when you hear about these things that just happen in Parkland, it's disgusting that 20 seconds into that, had that shooter known a school resource officer was coming through the door, it probably would have just ended his life, and how many lives would have been saved. There's discussion about, I have this slide in here for one reason. It's not to start controversy or get into a big debate about it, but it's just a reminder to what our response is going to be, and for me to talk about staff or other citizens with guns. When we come into a building where there's been a report of shots being fired and students dying, if you are holding a weapon, you are going to be shot immediately by the police. That's just it. There's no, we're not going to take time to check out who you are. We're not going to make sure you're not the science teacher who's concealed carrying. You're walking down a hall with a gun, you're going to get rifle rounds into your center mass, upper hydraulics, right where we train to stop threats, and you're probably not going to live that event. That's the world we live in. That's unfortunate, and there's events right here in Wisconsin that prove that's how we're trained and that's how we react. There's been a recent event in Appleton, and then the one in Neenah where the hostage came out holding a gun in that motorcycle shop over in Neenah. And then there was one in Appleton where call to shots being fired in a bar, and the wrong person got shot because of the same type of situation. Both justified shoots. We don't know who you are. We don't know why you should have a gun in a school. There shouldn't be guns in school. And we're not going to risk our lives or any more people's lives to check that all out while you're holding a gun. Zach, how often do you do fire drills?
Once a month.
Once a month?
Once a month.
Good to hear. I'm always here for that.
My point of this slide is it's been 1958 since we've had over 10 deaths in a single fire incident in schools. There's probably a sprinkler system in here. Half the materials in here probably are treated with something so they don't burn. We talk about fire drills, we plan for them. There's a binder. Zach gave me a binder the other day with all the things we do for a fire or a chemical leak, but how often are we having an open discussion about what if somebody with a gun comes through the school? 1958 was the last time we had a major event where a bunch of kids died in a school fire. And I don't have the exact stats. The Google machine was giving me problems with current fires, but I couldn't find even single deaths within the last decade where students have died and been trapped in a school fire. But yet we practice them, we schedule drills, we talk about them. Every kid in the school knows what to do in case of a fire. All of you guys know what to do in case of a fire. You practice it once a month. And no one's dying from fire. But hundreds and hundreds of kids a year are dying from active shooter things. And it's not going to happen here. Won't happen. There's the stats since 2000. The light pink is wounded, and the red is killed. This only, I know it's Wikipedia again, but the school shootings are only a small percentage of active shooters too. That's just what we're talking about today. Actually, the majority of active shooter events are employee adult situations. Somebody going into their business place and shooting up the place. So the stats are off the charts if we incorporate those into these. So in March, was it March, Zach? It's not a trick question. The other one was. We did a full scale, I wouldn't call it full scale, we did a active shooter training here at the high school with the whole department. Everyone from the sheriff to our school resource officer and was involved in that, and it went very well. Thank you, school staff. Jim, thanks for allowing us to do that. I think you guys can feel pretty confident that every member of the sheriff's office is pretty familiar with the school. We did specific drills regarding specific classrooms, specific wings, the layout. We took tours. We had specific scenarios using 223 blanks where they responded through the whole school, responding to the sound of gunfire. We used the simunition rounds, little 9mm paint marking rounds to engage the bad guys as we did that. We provided care. We did a lot of debriefing and after care as far as talking about what we did wrong and what we did right. I thought it went very well. It was much more manageable than the large-scale incident we had a few years ago. This was much more beneficial, I think. Who is the science teacher that I shot their window up? Not here? Do they even know about it? Do we get it fixed before they know it? I was going to apologize for that. Apparently those paint rounds go through screen. I thought we were safe there, but I was going to give an apology for that. It's the far back corner of the Red Wing. Is that you? Sorry about that. On a positive note, every law enforcement officer in the county knows how to run to your room if there's a problem. So I guess I'll open it up. What time do we have? Or two. So we've got a couple minutes for questions if you have any. Specific, something I touched on but didn't go into detail enough for you. Anything about our response or I don't know, anything that's on your mind? Yeah, go ahead.
In our building, we have classrooms that have no windows and only one entry.
Are you in the middle school?
That's elementary.
Oh, elementary. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna start thinking about what you're gonna do. Believe me, there are schools and buildings much older and much worse layout and design than I've seen in Adams. I would be happy, and this is something we can talk about in a future date, I'd be happy to come around with staff and talk about your workspace, take a look at your workspace, talk about options, talk about things that maybe you've thought about or not thought about. We do that for businesses in the community. I'd be happy to do it for teachers or classrooms or something we can work on with maybe a larger scale approach district-wide at some point. I'll start those conversations, but if you get caught in that room, I would be swaying more on the hide or barricading or what do I have in my room to make sure that no one can ever get through this door type thing, and get it figured out, and then you don't have to worry about it and get back to teaching and leading. Yeah, go ahead.
What would a shot sound like down in the Red Wing if it was shot in the Commons area or in the library area? Like, what would you hear?
Nothing. That's a big misconception, and we've done that in the past. I know years ago I came through Grand Marsh Elementary. I think the sheriff's gone through some other schools. We've gone through the courthouse and Health and Human Services with rifle blanks, the 223 blanks on our tactical rifles, and the layout and design of the school and the wings, the sound does not travel well. It does not travel well at all. I think at Grand Marsh even, we were having a hard time. Grand Marsh has like the gym in the middle, right? Everything's kind of around the gym, if I remember correctly. And we were just like on the other side of the gym, and we're having a hard time hearing. Our staff was reporting they're having a hard time hearing it with the door shut on the other side. Granted, a blank isn't exactly as loud as a real round, but those rifle blanks are pretty loud. So, the first sign of an active shooter event might be the PA announcement. It might be students running down the hall. It might not be gunshots. Or it might not be something you distinguish right away as gunshots.
What's the best practice for a PA announcement? Or is there
No, I believe the policy.
Can you repeat the question?
Policy.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. What's the best practice for PA announcements? Basically, what should be said, or what's the statistics on? I don't know statistics on the outcome of when PA announcements are made versus when they're not. The PA announcement here, I believe, is something about an intruder in lockdown or something like that. So, I don't know. Everyone needs to know that should happen. The emergency plan I read talks about calling the office right away or calling 911 right away to make sure that other people know about that and then to go into lockdown. Go ahead.
Is there any data regarding gender of these school shooters, and if so, what can be done regarding that?
Yeah, it's mostly males. I want to say, I actually have that information. I didn't put it in the slide, or I should say Zach didn't put it in his PowerPoint. I'd have to think through everything to find. I can get it to you if you want, but it's something. It's like 7% are female. It's very low, and
So what can we as a school or as a district do to help help our male population regarding violence?
I don't think there's any one thing. I think as it pertains to shooting events, intervention, from everything I know about them, intervention is your best option. Like, we're here to talk about the response to one because that's worst case scenario. But if you gained anything from what I was talking about today, it's that active shooters written on these people's foreheads. I mean, they're telling people, they're planning, the Virginia Tech shooter was at a public gun range with laying the paper silhouette targets down on the ground and going down the gun range practicing kill shots on people that were down and preparing for the shooting event. Hundreds and hundreds of people at this public range witnessed this crazy guy doing this for weeks on end leading up to that shooting. And no one said, this is weird. This guy's at the public range practicing kill shots on body silhouettes on the ground. So that's the big message I want to get across here today, is that these are preventable. If you have a student who makes a little threat, or you have a student that's experienced a major loss and has a history of violence, we should be dumping resources into them as far as what's going on and how can we help. But
I'm a substitute teacher, and I'm just going to be making a general type thing. There is often, I've been in a classroom and I've looked for that blanket and everything punch. I have yet to have found.
sure.
And so I don't expect any substitute or any teacher to have it out in total display. But in your substitute teaching plans, you need to say, this is where you can find it, just in the off chance. I mean, I do my best in that I never have the door unlocked. So I can shut the door, but that's, if I don't know where to find something.
Sure. Yeah, and part of me being here today is part of a bigger plan and talking with Jim about some steps we're going to be taking, especially there may be some funding opportunities. I don't know the status of that, but with the school safety bill that Walker just signed, to come up with some plans, put some protocols in place, do some evaluations of school safety, and have a better discussion about that and make sure stuff is readily available to all staff members. I didn't know about the blanket punch thing until just recently at the training we did make sure there's some plans and protocols in place and everyone has the information they need. But
Specific for any statistics about how an active shooter enters the school?
no, there's no specific pattern. One commonality that does show up in a high percentage of it is a sniper style attack. There's been several instances of that recently too, where a fire alarm is pulled and everyone goes to like a staging area and then they open fire on the staging area. Again, they plan these. They know if I pull the fire alarm at this hour, this class is going to exit out this door full of the kids I don't like, and all I have to do is sit in the woods and open fire on this class. That's been, I can think of 3 recent active shooter events where that exact situation happened. That's why I'm a big proponent against rendezvous points or meeting places that plan that students have. If an active shooter event happens, run home. Accountability's out the window in my book. Like, if you're not on a roster or we can't find you for a day, I don't care as long as you're alive. Run home. Run all the way through the city of Adams, wherever you live, get as far away from the school as you can. We'll find you alive and well some other day. I'm not worried about checking your name off a list at that time. So those are discussions we need to have moving forward with making policy and procedure.
How often is there a targeted list in hindsight after it's over?
I don't have exact numbers, but often. Yeah.
So we talk about drills, right? And fire drills are they've proven to be very effective. What does the research say about, what does a drill look like at an elementary level? What does it look like at a middle school level and a high school level? How should we prepare?
For active shooters, they don't exist. That's why I'd love to talk about them. I'd love to, I'm sure there's places doing them, but they are not common knowledge. Everyone usually watches the Run, Hide, Fight video once a year and says, let's hope it doesn't happen here.
Right, so what do we do to prepare our kids a little bit with how, would it be emotionally and psychologically appropriate?
Sure. That's a great question because I think that's the hang up is, well, I don't want to scare middle school kids with.
What was the question?
How do we prepare mentally for kids? So we don't traumatize them but still talk about active shooter events. I don't think you do it any different. Those with kids in the room, you talk to them about strangers, you talk to them about stop, drop, and roll, what to do in fire safety. Most of you probably have a family plan where to go if the house starts on fire, what to do. I think there's a way to incorporate what if a bad guy comes into school, what do we do, where do we go, who do you listen to? I don't know why that's off limits to talk about. And we talk about burning up alive in the building with kids, and we go through safety over and over about it. But a bad guy that's completely out of their control that comes into the school, it's traumatizing to talk about that. I don't buy that. What?
One of the things in the middle school we talked about with communication, there's different areas where you can't hear the PA announcements, like if we've gone into a soft lockdown. So that's something, we may be getting more walkie-talkie radios or something for those
Sure.
in that area. I think would be beneficial.
So the question's communication, basically. There's areas where you don't hear the PA.
Right.
We're dealing with the same things at the county building. But the PA system only works in parts of the buildings. It doesn't go across some people's phones. What to do, at the simplest level, what to do in a tornado warning. You can't even tell the whole courthouse what's going on at the same time. So those challenges are everywhere, and hopefully we're going to work towards fixing it. But
So it seems like most of the time when you talk about it, it seems like the active shooter situation is during school time. What happens if the chain goes after school, say, like, where you haven't organized like a basketball game?
well, our response will be the same. Good luck planning for the basketball gym full at a basketball game. And, sometimes those things are just going to be absolute chaos. There's no way to effectively plan for a bunch of visitors in your school. It's how many people have been to a Badger game when they go over the emergency plan in the beginning at the football stadium, and you watch that thing while you're, when a thunderstorm rolls into Camp Randall, they can't get 85 50,000 people out of that stadium, but somebody shooting, everyone's just gonna magically disappear out of the stadium? I don't think so. So it's gonna be chaos. I don't know how you plan for that specifically. Yeah, go ahead.
You said you practice at the high school and you know each wing. Will you ever be practicing at the middle school or out at Grand Marsh, or maybe you're not familiar?
That's first off, we have. We practiced at the middle school a year or two ago. We used the lower half of the school to do active shooter stuff downstairs there. And that's the goal, is to kind of rotate that training every year to become more familiar with it. So far we've done the middle school, the high school, and the courthouse county building, some of the major areas. But yeah, the goal is next year, been talking with Zach, he wants to try to incorporate something a little more intensive at the middle school, especially with the different floors and levels and things. But
If we're running out of the school, we do need to go with our hands up. That was what we were taught before, so they don't.
thank you. Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And thank you for your service for all what you're doing for us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, your hands should be up. You know, it shouldn't be palms so we can see what's going on, and preferably run towards where the officers are coming from.
You just said run away.
What's that?
No, you just said run away.
No. I'm saying if I'm running this way towards the threat, it's a safe bet. It's a safe bet if you run the opposite direction of me. That area's been cleared already, and you're safe to go. That's what I was getting at. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just really quick. Is there any research that shows that actively engaging students in these sorts of presentations would deter any active shooter? Like you showed us the silhouette you talked about, the hydraulics. You're going to get shot one way. Is there anything that shows that if kids are talked to in this way, sort of what happens and these things are shown? Will that
Not that I'm aware of. In fact, in every, I have a network of other trainers and law enforcement. This is a taboo subject. We don't talk to kids about it. It's just the way it is. So hopefully we can change that. I don't think it's going to be earth-shattering at first, but maybe we can start taking steps to get there. So, am I out of time, Tim? Oh, okay. Any other questions? What?
Second one question is more of a statement. At the high school, we used to do things where one of our administrators would come around and we'd lock our doors, close our doors and hide, and we'd pound on the doors, and we used to do that. I don't know why we stopped doing that, but I distinctively remember one time hearing about how he yelled at one teacher saying, "You're dead." So that was stuff that we used to do. Why would we stop?
Yeah, good question. What is it? The policy, doors have to be locked during school hours or during classroom hours? That policy, okay. Well, we could start there. I've walked through the school a few times doing things, and as I walk down the hallway, all the doors magically click behind me as I'm walking through the hallway. Again, I don't write school policy, but I know that's a policy, and it takes a sheriff's deputy walking down the hallway to get teachers to shut their doors during hours. So, little things. There's a whole bunch of little things we all can do a little better. And ultimately, the goal is to provide a safer school. But
I'm also a substitute teacher too. I usually go pretty much everywhere, so I really don't have like one room or one wing where I spend most of my time in. So there's, it's going to be different wherever I am. Everybody have different set of children, different age group of children and everything, so there's no way I can memorize every room what I need to do. So yeah, it is nicer if we can have better illustrations in the room, what to do, like right at the door, we got your emergency thing, fire drills and all that. Maybe make sure we have the bigger illustrations for the subs to use. See me more kicking in. I guess that's it. I just want to make a point that.
Sure. So her point was to more information to the substitutes about layout plans and things like that. I think that's easy things the school can work towards. It's also, everyone's responsibility to make sure they know that too. So if you've been teaching for 5 years as a substitute and that's been a concern of yours and haven't yet asked for that, we got a little bit of that responsibility on our shoulders as well too, that this is important, I need to know that information, who do I ask to to get that as well. I think if we're serious about safety, it's got to be on everyone's shoulders. Anything else? Good.
So we're kind of under the assumption that we're taking lead in our classrooms. How do we prepare our kids in the unfortunate event that we're the first victim? What was the question?
If the teacher is the first victim, how do they prepare their kids? I don't know how you, my honest answer, I don't know how you prepare a young child that their teacher gets shot in the classroom, how to react to that. I think that's why we need to have a bigger discussion about basics, basic fundamentals of school shooting, so that even if there isn't adult leadership, the students know some basic things they need to do, like we can get out the window, or we can do, we don't need to be told how to do this. And we all have those, I'm sure every class has got those students that probably are a little better at leading than others that could probably help other students along with some of those things as well. We need to identify, I'm sure you do for other drills, I'm sure for fire drills, every time you go outside, you got the kids you know are going to do it perfectly, and you got the kids you know you got to have a leash every time you go out for a fire drill. Assuming, but. Any other questions? Yeah.
This was in our past training where they told us this as well. If you come across the weapon as you're leaving, or you come across something, a weapon, you don't pick it up, obviously, what would you recommend we do? We step past it and go on, we kick it under a table, what do you do with it if you find it laying around?
I would just leave it alone. Yeah, I wouldn't touch it. The last thing you need is a deputy come around the corner of the hallway and you're standing there with an assault rifle you thought you secured. It's not going to end well. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for your cooperation with the Sheriff's Office in allowing us to train in these facilities so we become familiar with them. Just in the last couple of years with that openness,